It is estimated that up to 50% of runners suffer from them at some point in their running career, and the percentage is believed to be even higher in marathon and ultra-marathon participant runners. It is definitely the most misunderstood concept in running. Welcome back to the She Runs Strong podcast, powered by Coach Parry with me, Nicky Friedman, UK run coach, and Shona Hendricks, sports scientist. Today, we are tackling a topic that frustrates almost every runner at some point: muscle cramps. So I think most people can relate to this. You're in a race, often a marathon, an ultra, and then you're hit by your calves or your hamstrings locking up. So we're going to chat today about why this happens and how you can prevent it if there is a way to prevent it. But first, Shona, let's chat about your training and how things are going.
Not well, Nicky, if I can put it like that. I mean,
We're what,
yeah,
2
we've
weeks out?
couple
A
of
week
weeks
out?
out of Valencia. Yeah, I mean, and I had to make a call a week or two back
Yeah.
around Valencia, and I've just, I mean, we've mentioned it in the
So,
podcast, I've been a bit ill and trying to fight through that, and yeah, it's just I was off running for 3 weeks, and that's a big block of the marathon training, and obviously then it would take me time to build back. I hadn't booked any flights. I know we had spoken about
yep.
accommodation, but I hadn't booked my visa, or even got applied for my visa. And so I made the very, very, very difficult and not fun decision to pull
God.
out of the race. Which is not great because you feel like, well, I feel like a bit of, so you like just feel miserable about yourself, feel like a bit of a failure. Oh, you haven't pulled through the training and all of that. But I really didn't want to run because I could go and finish the race, but I really want to run a good, hard, fast marathon
Yeah.
again. And I didn't want to spend all that money because it is an expensive and a far way to go to just run another marathon. But I wanted to run it well. And so, yes, I'm bleak and I'm sad and a little bit frustrated, but yeah, and also because it was also just going to be such a fun girls' weekend. I mean, we were
Yes.
going to go and Nicky and I were staying with some friends and fellow
Coach
Coach Parry
Parry.
members. Yeah,
Yep.
would have been a lot of fun. Yeah, so now my FOMO is also kicking in. Now I'm struggling with that, but definitely the right decision.
I
Yeah,
think
it's hard being on the other side of I've helped athletes make this decision, but yeah, so it's hard to be on the other side of it, but it is the right decision for sure. Yeah.
it is a really tough. I mean, I saw you, we both came down with the illness at the same
Mm.
time, and you just never seemed to kick it. It was just hanging on and hanging on, and it just, I think when it takes your system down, it's
Yeah,
so hard to then push up, and the last thing you need is to be training for a marathon when you're trying to get well.
exactly.
So I know I really felt for you when you made that decision, and it's a real struggle in your head. And I don't know about you, but I never want to let these things go, so I hold on to them for quite a long time before I actually
Yeah.
make the decision, and then it's like, oh,
Absolutely, and I mean, I spoke to you quite in depth. You were traveling at the time, and just bounced the ideas off you a bit, and yeah, but it's amazing that when I made that decision, it's just yeah. I mean, I just started crying because I was so bleak, but I felt like such a massive weight. You had said the same thing, just a massive weight because then it isn't this pressure of okay, well now I'm 6 weeks out from the marathon, I need to be doing X, and all of that pressure. So at least this way, I allowed myself to get better. I'm now finally better. I can now finally start training again. I'm going to do another marathon, probably, well, not another. I'm going to do a marathon in Feb next year. It's actually a night marathon, which is going to be very interesting. Yeah, so it's at in the northwest of South Africa. My boyfriend has a farm out there, and we're both going to use that as our qualifier for Two Oceans. Starts at 5:30 in the evening, and there's candles that light the road up along the way. So, going to be a nice experience, a new experience as well. So, there's always a silver lining or something new
yes,
to look forward to. So, as bleak as I am, yeah. And actually, Nicky, it's all of these things fall into place, and I landed up reading a question in the forum and answering a question in the forum recently, and someone actually commented. I haven't told you this. Someone commented, his name's Gretchen, and she landed up improving her BQ time. It was amazing. And she said in there, because she had also had trained for a marathon that got cancelled, and you had said to her, no training goes wasted. So yes, as much as frustrating as it is coming back now from illness, the training hasn't disappeared. It's
No,
going
no,
to come back. It's not like that training that I was doing up until that point is wasted. So all of these things just fall into place a little bit, and yeah, thank you for that as well. Yeah,
well, we will miss you. We will
I
miss
know,
you,
and
but
the FOMO will kick in hard, but you guys must send photos, and yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, it'll be
maybe
great.
we'll make it an annual thing, and maybe you'll make it there next
Oh,
year. And
amazing!
someday the
That'll be
pressure
great. I'd
will come
love that.
out. I
Yeah.
know. Well, it is. I remember last year just thinking, I just have to come back to this marathon. It's brilliant. So
Mm.
next year. But anyway, yeah, hopefully that sounds like an awesome marathon you're signed up for. But let's crack into this today. We're talking about muscle cramps, and we're going to unpack a bit about this. But first, let's just start with what are muscle cramps?
Yeah, so I think if you if you've suffered from cramps, you know what they are, right? So
Yes,
a sudden,
painful.
involuntary, painful contraction of the muscle that doesn't relax. And I mean,
Oh,
I feel quite lucky. I'm not sure about you. I haven't really suffered from cramps before. Particularly, and I've played high intensity sports like hockey, and people know about my
yeah, yeah,
frisbee
yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
days. But I've never really struggled. So I think if you have struggled, you absolutely know what they are. But
They're
yeah,
incredibly painful. I mean, they're
yeah,
just I
exactly.
got them a lot when I was pregnant. It's a real thing when you're pregnant,
Okay.
and pain in the middle of the night. I also get them when I swim a lot, after running.
Ah,
So I
hmm.
used to get them from the push off from the wall.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
common one, and, again, very painful. So, yeah.
And I think that's important distinction to make. So when you mention pregnancy, here we're gonna be talking around exercise-associated muscle cramps, right? And so, that's more, specific to running and marathons and people cramping in their races. Um, and we will touch on a little bit around cramping at night as well, and perhaps because if you are a runner and you cramp at night, there are ways and things that we can look at, but we can talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, I think if you do cramp and you suffer from cramping, you know exactly what that feels like, and it's not a fun aspect. And so this is why we're venturing into this today. But yeah, let's
Where
see.
do you mainly get your cramps?
So the biggest thing is that cramps. Let's debunk a little bit of some of the science. I mean, the science, people always go, oh, well, it's an electrolyte concern, right? So this old school kind of thinking of dehydration or low electrolytes, but really, not that that doesn't happen, but that is less than 20%, if I'm not mistaken, of cramping in races. So the rest of that, the majority of cramping, has really got to do with what we call cross bridge fatigue. So very quickly, in our muscles, the way your muscles actually contract is they are these little aspects, the muscle fibers pull together and they connect. These cross bridges connect, and that's contraction, and then they release and they open up. And so when we are doing activities that last for a long time, when we are perhaps have certain imbalances within the muscles, there's fatigue in that cross bridge, and that's essentially where the cramp comes from. And so it's got more to do with your muscle activation and your neuromuscular system than it does necessarily to do with electrolytes and so on. There's, as I mentioned, an aspect of that, but it's really got more to do with your muscles and your nervous system and how all of that works together.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, because most people that are the people I speak to are always talking about it being a dehydration, and they have these massive bottles of electrolytes and stuff like that. And I suppose that does help in your muscles. But so we're talking the big muscle groups then, really, for this,
Yes.
aren't we? So,
Yes, definitely. Big muscle groups that cramp, but a lot of the time the big muscle groups cramp because the smaller muscle groups aren't strong enough and they aren't doing their job as well, right? So they aren't stabilizing enough, and then the big muscle groups are working really, really hard to maintain that, and that fatigue will set in. And so that is there's two aspects there. There's an element of fatigue, as I've mentioned, so that's why it happens later on in a marathon or in a race. But it also has to do with, as I mentioned, the neuromuscular system. So it's got to do with how the brain, the connection from the brain to the muscles, it's almost like it gets overexcited, and then it tells the muscle to contract, and there's that hyperexcitability, and then that's why we cramp. So, but yes, it is more prominent in the bigger muscle groups, and it's in the groups that tend to do a lot of the work. But yes, it's not around an electrolyte. Well, as I mentioned, there's around 20% of cramping in races is due to electrolytes, but it's not the only reason. And so many people now are, when they cramp, everyone's like, "Oh, you didn't have enough electrolytes. You didn't have enough salt. You didn't have, and
Yep.
it can be, but for the most part, it's not. That in the science has been debunked, and we've come to this theory of it's called cross bridge fatigue. And so yeah, that can definitely happen. And another aspect of that, where it comes to cramping, is where in one of the bigger muscles, so we're speaking around hamstrings, that often happen, and that could be that there's an imbalance between perhaps the quadriceps and the hamstrings, that the quadriceps are too strong or too weak, depending, compared to what the hamstring is. And those two muscles work together. When one contracts, one relaxes.
Yeah.
And what happens is one of those doesn't have the right kind of excitatory mechanism from the nervous system, or if one is weaker than the other, then it's going to fatigue and it's going to spasm or cramp as well. So, sorry, that seemed like a lot of sciencey talk.
No,
I hope.
so we've basically got the old theory, which is down to dehydration and electrolytes, and then the newer science or the newer theory, which you're saying is this cross bridge theory. So it's more down to just the muscles, just being less, just not as strong enough to hold. So yeah, so right, okay, so there's the two different theories. Okay, so and we've got a kind of question here. Why does this happen when you're running? Okay, so we're specifically into running here. So why is it happening when we're running?
I mean, a couple of reasons, and Nicky, chime in here as well, because you've had experience of this with
Yeah.
athletes as well. But I mean, so one of the biggest times I see athletes cramp is when they've paced their marathon incorrectly. So they've gone out too fast, which means that their muscles have had to work harder than what they are able to earlier on. And then this theory of cross bridge fatigue comes in, because they've worked too fast for what they are able to do. So the first element there really is around fatigue. All right. So long races, where you've worked harder than what your training load has allowed, really pushes your muscles into this territory where you can't sustain that effort.
Yep.
And that comes true with pacing as well. And we see it all the time, where someone's running a marathon and they will try and bank time and they go out way too fast, and then they start cramping at kilometer 26 or mile 20, or something like that. And yeah, for me, that's really the two main areas for runners, why they are cramping and running. Of course, the underlying mechanism is everything we've just spoken about in terms of the muscles and the cross bridge fatigue. But yeah, that's in your experience, Nicky, with the runners you've worked with.
If I had a pound for everybody who said I was on pace till 20 miles and then I got a cramp, like a cramp is like this unusual thing that they can't control. And I think that's what you're saying there with fatigue, is you actually can control it by running a little bit slower or correct pacing at the start.
Yeah, within yourself, yes.
Yes. And so often people have got to the 20, 21 miles and then they're starting to cramp. And it's like a kind of it just stops you dead almost. I mean, I've seen it. I remember running an Edinburgh Marathon, and I was just running down. There's a little bit of hill coming down. We're about 3 miles out, and I think I was using it as a training run, and this guy in front of me just collapsed with his hamstrings, and he was just in agony. And I remember this other guy beside us stopped, and we both stopped and did that thing where we were sort of holding his feet down and getting him to relax. And
Yes.
yeah, but he was in a lot of pain, and he just stopped completely. I mean, he just fell over because he was just it was just so bad for him. So I think yeah, I've definitely heard of it a lot, young and old. I don't
Yes.
think it necessarily. And I actually think another key factor is actually if your training cycle has been too much as well,
Yeah.
the pacing, it probably doesn't even matter. You've just overloaded your body over the weeks and the months, that then you go into the marathon and then your muscles are just too tired to actually
Absolutely.
do the race. And that's often your last couple of big long runs have
Yeah.
been done too fast, and then you start with the cramps. And there's many reasons that people kind of go, "Oh, I was dehydrated on the day,"
Yes.
but actually you've just done too much volume recently, or you've gone too hard, I think is very key. I mean, I haven't actually suffered from this particularly. I don't know, have you ever?
No, no, it's not something that I've personally suffered from. No, not
A
at
lot
all.
of runners who've suffered from it.
Yeah.
And
But I think sorry, that point is key as well, is, you know, your load in your training block, and how much strain you've put on the muscles, and
yeah,
then you ask the muscles to do a certain action. And I know we'll come to this, but if your training block also hasn't included strength work, there's a very good chance that your muscles are the quad and hamstring slightly imbalanced, or the calf and the peroneal muscles, which are at the front of the shin, are slightly imbalanced, and so then you're going to land up with the cramp. You know, and so yeah, we'll definitely come to that aspect as well. But interestingly, and this is just, I just want to mention this. This isn't something that I think is an absolute cause, because I actually have had this question before, and I think we actually answered this question in a Q&A not so long ago, is if caffeine can cause cramps. And I know we did that in a Q&A a few weeks ago, but it doesn't directly cause cramps. But what it can do is it can mask your, you know, your ability, and allow you to push harder, for where you are actually, or for what you're actually capable of, and then therefore the muscles get
push you
fatigued,
into it.
and you can cramp a little bit as well. So again, just too much caffeine, just watch out for that. But caffeine isn't a so it's a correlation. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
a causation. So but it is something, yeah, that if that does affect you, just look into that, and then look into the mechanism and how we can fix that in terms of, yeah, making you not cramp in time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, it's a, you know, if you're hitting that level of cramping, and then there do seem to be some people who are more prone to it than others. Definitely. In my experience, it's often the guys, and I would say that they tend to pace worse.
Pace worse, and that's, I mean, but that's a scientific fact. I mean, that is absolutely proven that men pace their races worse than women. I
Yes.
mean, yeah, so yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
And I would suspect they do in the long runs. An awful lot of guys I know were like, "Oh, my last couple of long runs I did at this pace. I was on set. I definitely could do that sub 3:30 marathon, sub 3 hours." Then when they get to race day, their body just almost packs up, and it's a way of telling them that that's where their body's weakness lies, because you're
Absolutely.
only really as strong as your weakest muscle. So if it's going to give up on you, then that's something you've got to focus on. So I think you can learn a lot from cramps, is my
Yes.
experience. Okay, look, let's talk about what the latest science suggests for prevention. Okay, so what does it suggest? How can we prevent it? We've talked a lot about muscle weakness, so I
Mm.
know what you're going to say, some strength training. But yeah, well, let's start with strength.
If you want to recover from sessions faster, not feel tired all the time, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join me in my upcoming training specifically for female runners over the age of 45. In it, I'll share with you my simple 5-step framework that'll transform your running. Simply scan the QR code on screen now, or click on the link in the description to save your seats in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there. Yeah, I mean, yeah, let's start to, but let me say this. If I had the answer for how we can prevent cramps, I wouldn't be sitting here with you running this podcast. I'd be sitting on an island sipping on a cocktail for the rest of my life, you know, because I'd have millions, right? Because
Yeah.
there isn't a single defining thing that can prevent cramps, okay? And everyone, and we actually spoke about this before, as you know, every runner is always looking for the silver bullet. Like, what can I do that's going to make me not cramp, right? And so there isn't necessarily a silver bullet. Let me just allude to this and push forward to say that we are going to give you 1 or 2 tips later that can help you in race day. But
Mhm.
how do we prevent cramps? There isn't an answer for that. But we can do certain things. And your points around, if you've cramps, it's going to teach you things, or give you hints as to what's going on in your training. So I think the first thing is, what are we doing in our training block that's not allowing us to handle the stress of the race that we are doing? So really ensuring that we're training specifically, that we're training for where our bodies are at. So not training for where we want to be, or for the race we want to achieve. You know, I want to qualify for Boston, but I can't currently train at that pace or at that intensity. And so I think that's an absolute key aspect. Yeah, I'm not sure. Is there something you want to add in on just the specificity of training and training for where you are with
No, I
that?
like that. I think that's really gold, actually, Shona. Is really like smart training and just really know where you're at with your
Yeah.
time trials and really hone in and don't try and go, but my goal pace is this. So many
Yes.
people, my goal pace in my 20-mile run is this. So I'm going to do my whole 20-mile run at this pace. That's just, yeah, a disaster, really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think knowing your paces, having a wee focus on your heart rate, if you're tuned in there, it's going to really, really help. So I think that I love that point. It's a really gold point, that one.
And
I then
then sorry, and then yeah, sorry, you go. No, you go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and then about strength training in that.
Yeah, and so in your training, understanding, and I know runners and strength training, and I know that if you've listened to this podcast, you can't get away from us talking about strength training. Nicky always laughs at me, but it is, stronger muscles, and this is scientifically proven. This is in the literature, is that if you are stronger, you fatigue much later on in a race. And a very quick study is that it's on men, but it's 10,000-meter runners, and there's some that did strength training and some that didn't. And those that did do strength training fatigued so much later in their 10,000-meter track race than those who didn't. They crossed the line stronger and faster. That's
Right.
the long and the short of it. So stronger muscles resist fatigue, right? So and you hit the nail on the head. You're only as strong as your weakest muscle. And so the more we can focus on getting strong, the less we're going to fatigue. Okay, so that's the first aspect that's really going to help prevent in inverted commas cramp. And the second aspect is we can start working on imbalances, as I've mentioned, in the muscles. And very often calf cramps are because there's an imbalance between the strength of the calf at the back of the calf of the leg and the strength at the front of the shin. And when we have that imbalance, one of them has to work harder than the other, or the brain sends a message to one and the other one gets a bit excited a bit early and contracts, and hence why we have cramp. And so it just becomes a non-negotiable again. I know I say that all the time, but runners hate this because especially runners who cramp don't like to hear that strength training is going to help them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is really key. I've seen this a number of times. I've had an athlete who's come, had a couple who were trying to do a sub-3 and they had hamstrings. And I was like, right, okay, we need to get you in the gym for the next marathon. We need to strengthen through, your body, but with maybe a wee focus on your hamstrings, because maybe you're just quad dominant. And yeah, and it works, if you just, because sometimes we forget about muscle groups and they work really hard when running. The only other thing I'd say with strength and conditioning, and I know people like Pilates, but I quite like yoga to go along with this as well. If you're
Yeah.
someone that is prone to cramps and you get, I would say, almost quite tense when you come towards the end of a marathon or the end of an ultra marathon, knowing how to breathe and calm the whole system down, because sometimes you can sort of feel your little, I've never had a cramp in a marathon, but I've felt like I've been a bit on the edge. You can sort of, that
Yeah.
bit in the last 3
Yeah.
miles, you feel a
Shivering.
little bit
Yes,
on
yes.
the edge. And almost I feel sometimes that I'm about to hyperventilate. So the whole system isn't getting oxygenated as well. And just having that focus on breathing. And yoga can really help with your system and just the breathing and learning how to breathe, which can help in the later stages. It's a slightly off tangent of the strength and conditioning, but I quite like that sometimes, just maybe once a week, or for
Yeah.
runners, a runner's yoga as opposed to the things. But I think that's
Yeah.
also quite an interesting one to do as well.
I think
Um,
that's it. Yeah, no, I really agree with that.
yeah. So fuel and hydration, can that help with?
Yes, and so I think the environmental factors of the day of your race are going to have an impact, right? So if it is very hot, you are someone who cramps, so your likelihood of cramping is a higher risk. You have a higher risk of cramping in very hot conditions, and so while dehydration isn't necessarily the main cause of your cramping, it can worsen it, right? Or it can just push you over the edge again. So again, just ensuring that you are you're going into your race fueled, you're going into your race hydrated. Yeah, I just think that's absolutely key. And if you're not taking in carbs, you are going to fatigue earlier because the muscle's going to have to then get carbohydrates from your muscle glycogen, and then when that runs out, then it's going to be like, okay, well, the brain's going to say, well, I can't help you anymore, I need glycogen to stay alive. And so the muscles are then going to cramp because they're not going to have the fuel that they need to do the contractions. So yeah, I definitely think that is key. While it's not a main cause, it can make it worse. And the same goes for electrolytes as well. So the same thing, like we were saying, it's not necessarily the cause. It can be, perhaps, but again, if you're someone who does cramp, I would really make sure that you are taking in enough electrolytes, having enough sodium, so replacing that salt aspect as well. Yeah, I definitely think that's absolutely vital. Yeah, so if you are someone who cramps, you absolutely have to look after those aspects.
Yeah. So there's quite a lot there, really, in the prevention, and it's quite a lot of smart training, really, all in all, as we talk about a lot. What do we do, though, if a cramp strikes in a race? So we've kind of thought we've done it all, but how can we actually, is there anything we can do?
I mean, it's the usual. Again, this isn't going to be a silver bullet where if you take it and it's going to work. But I mean, the usual sort of stuff, you've seen it in races. People slow down and they stretch, right? And the stretch can just help activate essentially a signal to the brain. It's just the muscle now sending a message back to the brain going, something's not okay. It can kind of help with that. And that's why we stop and stretch. It also just feels like it's a bit of relief. Okay. So I think that's definitely one of them. Slow down, stop briefly. I know sometimes in a marathon, when you feel like you stop, it's tough to get started again. But just reducing that load, it can give the nervous system just a little bit of time to reset. A little bit of massage can help, but again, you want to be careful with this because you don't want to massage too deeply. I've had athletes stop and get a massage from, like people on the side of the road, and then if they've gone too deep, they've actually torn that muscle. So just be very, very careful with that. But light, gentle, little massage can help. Yeah, and then just building up gradually back to that pace. So again, if you're cramping because of a pacing issue, don't go back to, well, you won't actually be able to go back to running at the pace you were, but just gradually build back. And Nicky, I love what you were talking about breathing, and I just think that
So I have a really good
an
story
important.
about that. I like just adding in some walk breaks because I think it changes
Excellent.
the muscle motion and movement pattern. But also the breathing is a really big thing, and runners aren't necessarily great at that because we tend to be type A fast people, and so I don't think we tend to focus on it, and this is where yoga is quite good. But I was at a marathon recently. I was watching a friend do a marathon. It's at Dorney Lake, which is just outside of London, and she was doing, I think it's 8 5K, was it 8 or 9 loops? Gosh, I can't do the maths today. But we were sitting on our chairs. We had a nice chairs and our Starbucks coffee, and we were watching her going round and round, and it was quite fun because they went up and down. But there was this guy who came down, and he was on for about a 3:05 or a 3:10. Older guy, I think, probably late 60s maybe. And he came down, and then all of a sudden he started shouting and screaming really irrationally. He was like quite angry, quite scary guy, actually. He was swearing away, and he had 2 cramps. Well, both his calves cramped. And he was just like, oh my gosh. And he was swearing, and he was like, I've got 5 minutes to get to the finish. I could have done my PB. And he said, and we were watching this kind of unfold. And
Yes.
a few of the other spectators were standing around going, what do we do? And I was sort of looking. And then eventually I said to Sophie, I was like, okay. And I gave her my coffee and went, right, I'll go and sort this out. And I went up to him. And I think he must have thought it was really strange. This lady came up, and I took his hand and I went, okay, you're going to breathe with me. Let's just breathe. Deep breath in through the nose and blow out through the mouth. Deep breath in through the nose, blew out through. And he's still swearing and shouting at me. But I think he got such a shock that I stood there with him, just talking about breathing and breathing. And we went on like this for a wee while and wee while. And then he just trotted off. And he did his PB.
Excellent.
Went down me later, and it was a good while later. He suddenly came up. I was doing something else, and he went, are you the lady that stopped? He was like, I've never had cramp in a race before. I've been running marathons for years. I've never had cramp like that before. It was agonizing, and you just like got me my PB. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem.
Brilliant.
And yeah, so I think sometimes just relaxing your system, breathe in through your nose. Because if you're, yes, you might be going a bit faster at a marathon, but you should be able to calm your breathing down a little bit and then just almost focus on that area and just calm your whole system. Because I think there's a thing at the end of a marathon where you tend to be a bit hyperventilating anyway.
Yes.
And so that doesn't help. And so some deep breaths into the diaphragm can really help. Anyway, I'm getting off topic there, but so I think you can do it yourself. You just have to learn how to do it. And this guy hadn't learned how to breathe and calm himself down. He was just into this sort of irrational shouting, screaming. And when I spoke to him later, because he was quite scary, I think everybody was quite scared of this guy. Whereas when I spoke to him later, he was a lovely guy, but he worked himself up. Anyway, so I think breathing is really key. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's I love that story, by the way, and
Yeah,
you
it
tied
was great.
it with yoga, so no.
I
And
think
then
Sophie was quite like, "How do you know how to do that?" And I was like, "I just do. I've been doing this for years."
yeah, exactly. We've seen this before, watched the
Yes.
story before, so yeah, I love that. I think the only thing that is new that could be the silver bullet that crampers are looking for is there's a lot of research around the effect of drinking or taking in pickle juice and cayenne pepper that actually stops the cramp. And so it doesn't prevent the cramp, okay, but it can help reduce the severity of the cramp. It can help you feel like the cramp isn't there. And I know, like, who's running with a bag of pickle juice.
I know.
So it's not a matter of that. It's some of the nutrition companies are now bringing out, stop cramping gels. I know in South Africa there's a company that's bringing out what they're called Cramp Not, and these gels or these, and I've seen it on TV. A lot of the soccer players. I've saw it in the Women's Cricket World Cup where they're playing in India, very hot, and one of the girls is cramping, and they're taking these gels in now, and those gels will very likely have cayenne pepper or pickle juice in them. And the way that works is that what it does is that as that goes into your mouth, your the little sensors in your mouth pick up this sharp, sour kind of taste, sends a message to the brain, and the brain, it's just this excitatory message. And the brain can then sometimes just divert that message, and it gets sent out to the muscles that they have to react in a certain way. And then that can sometimes be enough to help release that cramp. And there's a lot of research that backs this in them at the moment. So yeah, I guess if you are looking for a particular silver bullet for something to happen on race day, that would be the answer. Again, of course, we don't want to try anything new on race day, but we never know when cramp is going to strike. So maybe just have one of these with you, in particular to help. Yeah.
I guess if you're prone to cramps, then don't you, to take sound disgusting to eat.
Yeah, I don't think they taste good at all.
Yeah.
And I played in that frisbee tournament recently, and I
Yeah.
was laughing with you, Nicky, that all the youngsters, all these young men were cramping and falling left, right, and center. I mean, obviously they're running a lot faster and harder than I was, but yeah, one of the guys had a little bit of, or had one of these gels that had pickle juice in it, and it tastes horrendous. But yeah, it reduced the cramp. It doesn't prevent the cramp. Okay, that cramp is going to come back. But what it does is it just helps release that cramp a little bit and the severity of it, so you can then continue for a little bit more. So I would use that as the first sort of step if you are cramping, but then all of the things that we've said around slowing down, utilizing some walk breaks, stretching that muscle, picking it back up gently from there, then should help you at least finish your race and finish it not in agony or in pain. But yeah, so look at those and try them. If you are someone who cramps, I guess you are going to try anything on race day if
Yes.
you get into a cramp, and see if those help. But there is some really, really good research around those at the moment, for sure.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so the big takeaways, we've got them all just isolated there. We've covered everything there. It's basically just smart training, pacing smart, building strength,
Mm-hmm.
fueling properly. And then if you're prone to cramps, you need your pickle juice or your cayenne. No, your pickle juice is like pickle juice.
Yep,
You need
take
your
out of
pickle
pickle.
juice or your cayenne pepper.
Yep.
And yeah, a
Yeah.
bit of walking and breathing and anything else we need to add into that. I think that's
Yeah,
it.
I think that's hit the nail on the head there. And you know, there isn't there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't a one size fits all here. There isn't, the things that I think are the one size fits all are the things you mentioned around training specifically for where you're at, and incorporating some strength work. Those things are going to make a difference no matter what. But the other things are quite specific to the individual, and fueling and hydrating and the cayenne pepper and the pickle juice. But yeah, I think if you are someone who cramps, this is a frustrating thing, but try and focus on those strength aspects and the training aspects, and hopefully that
Yeah.
stops you from cramping on race day.
I mean, if you have any good remedies, pop them
Yeah.
down in the comments below. We'd love to hear of any strange, bizarre remedies that work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just pop it down and let us know. We'd love to hear. Otherwise, I
Yeah.
think we're good for today.
That is it, yeah. So if you, yeah, as Nikki says, if you do have a remedy, let us know. I would love to add that to our list of things to help. But yeah, hopefully this helps. Hopefully you no longer cramp if you start implementing a few of these things. But yeah, looking forward to the next episode. Nikki, thank you so much for your time as well.
Right. Well, good. Yep. Thanks for listening, folks. And we will see you next week. Cheers, Shona. Bye.
Bye bye.